So I think that we're hearing a little bit of background noise coming from Rita and from Rachalea and Bela Esther. So if we can, if I can ask maybe one of you to mute yourselves for a moment, that way we won't get that feedback.
One.
Here, Rita, I'm gonna mute you for now. So that way, actually, wait, no, I'm gonna would have to mute both of you. Rita and Brett, I'm muting you just so that we don't hear feedback from the microphone and speakers of you guys being right there. Hey, where did Brett just disappear to?
Rabbi, could you mute me too, Joan?
Yes, I can mute you as well. And then, Joan, is your video working? I'm gonna unmute you for a second. Is your video working? Either way. Okay, so if my internet goes down at any point, we'll just hope that it's working good for now, which it seems to be. Good morning, Moshe Chaim. Many of us know where's Rita going? She's gonna join us. Oops, you're muted here. Brett, you're on mute. There should be a button to unmute yourself. There we go.
Okay.
Where is Rita going to be joining us back?
Yeah, she's just doing it in her room. She came in to help me get on because I didn't know how to get on.
Perfect. Well, we're glad that you're here.
She's not on yet.
Okay, perfect. Some of us know Moshe Chaim from before. And I would like us all to send a collective condolences to Moshe Chaim. His father passed away last week. Moshe Chaim is currently in the middle of Shiva. The learning should be an aliyah for the neshama of his father, Hersh ben Baruch. We wish you only good and happiness and health and strength for you and your whole family and your dear mother. I also want to dedicate this series to my mother, Leah Miriam Bas Yaakov Yosef. Her second yahrzeit is coming up soon. We're going to get started now. Does everyone have the papers in front of them, or should I pull up the papers on the screen?
I have the papers. I don't know if Rita has them. She's still not on yet. She went back to her room to do it.
Okay.
I could use the papers, Rabbi.
Okay, so I'm going to put that up online. Where's this? Share screen. Here. Okay. Does everyone see my screen over here?
I see it.
Yep.
Okay. Perfect. Let's make that a little bit bigger over here. Welcome, Steve.
Hello.
Great to see you.
Thank you. Can you? Are you able to?
Yeah, we see you. At least at the top, we see your eyes. We see your glasses. I'm going to quickly send this link to
There we go.
Oh, where's the email? Where is this? Where's this email that came in yesterday over here? No, not this. Here we go. Okay. Copy. And where's start to? And let's give Leib Moshe a reminder as well, and then we'll jump right in. Okay. Oh,
I still don't see
Lisa's
Rita.
already in. There we go. Look at that. Okay, Rita, do you hear us? Okay, and Lisa, Leah Esther, good morning. Welcome, everyone. Great to have you all on over here. We're gonna start, and this is being recorded, so we could get the feedback later. So we're going to start this morning with a little bit of an overview to give us some context before we jump in actually to the beginning of the Talmud. Hopefully, we'll get through all of this today, and next week we'll start straight in. The most important word that I want us to know today is Masorah. Masorah means passed down, which is the tradition. So to come with the right attitude when we're learning, there are many people who look at the Talmud as well as any derivatives of Jewish law and thinking, and it seems that the approach is we have a Torah, and then many years later, rabbis were trying to figure out what does the Torah mean, and what do we do, and how are we supposed to act? So let's look at the Torah and interpret it, and then we know how to act. If that were the case, then if I have a different interpretation, I can act differently. Or if someone else has a different interpretation, they can interpret it differently themselves as well. And anyone is open to create their own interpretation of the Torah and their own set of laws based on the Torah. And today, I want to explain why that is not the correct approach. And the big word that we're going to use is Masorah, which is tradition. In other words, when Hashem gave the Torah, and so we have the Bible, right? The 5 books of Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu came down from the mountain with the Torah. When he came not only with the actual words of the 5 books of Moses, but with the commentary as well. So let me ask you this question. Until the writing of the Talmud, this is an open question for anyone who would like to can answer. When the Torah, before the Talmud was written down, how did the Jews keep Shabbos?
I don't know.
Rita, are you there?
They didn't.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
You can't see me?
No.
We can hear you, but we can't see you.
Okay, well, I'm here. I can see everybody.
Okay, perfect. So we have some people who say maybe they didn't keep Shabbos until we had the Talmud, until the Talmud was written. Anyone else? So the answer is that the Jewish people were keeping Shabbos even before the Torah was actually given on Mount Sinai. There were a few laws that were given, like the Passover sacrifice was given to the Jewish people before they left Egypt. Also, the mitzvah of a bris milah, to have a circumcision, was given to the Jewish people before, as well as Shabbos. So they were keeping Shabbos already from before the Torah was given at Mount Sinai. They were given the instructions of how to keep Shabbos. So if the Jewish people have been keeping Shabbos already for over 1,000 years before the Talmud was written, why do we have all these discussions of what we're supposed to do on Shabbos, what we're not supposed to do on Shabbos, and trying to prove from the verses, from the Torah, what is the correct way to act on Shabbos? So we're going to get a little bit more into detail soon, but the simple explanation and what happened is that the Jewish people were taught everything student from their teacher, and then when they grew up, they became the teachers and taught their students. Children learned from their parents, and everything was communicated orally. Everything was word of mouth, and like one of my teachers said when I was learning for my rabbinical degree, we were learning from the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. And his introduction was, the Code of Jewish Law was written for converts and orphans. I asked him, what do you mean by that? He says, because if you grew up in a Jewish home, you don't need a book of Jewish law. You do what your parents did. Now, how do you make Kiddush? You make Kiddush the way your father made Kiddush. But as we're going to see soon, unfortunately, due to the the exiles and the people did not have enough time to learn or teach their kids properly, things were started to be written down. So the Talmud and all the discussions in the Gemara are not trying to figure out something new. It's not like we found this ancient text and we're trying to interpret it. We know what we do, and we're trying to figure out how that fits in with the verses in the Torah. And we'll see also soon how you could have sometimes arguments and discussions about what is done. So the first thing that we're going to start learning with is actually the time for Shema. That's going to be the beginning of the Talmud. Starts off with the Mishnah. When do we read Shema in the evening? So what the Torah says, and you should read these words and you should speak in them when you get up in the morning, when you lay down at night, and when you get up in the morning. So until the Talmud was written down, or until the Mishnah was written down, were the Jewish people not reading Shema? I mean, these are all scholars, they're all sages, and they were obviously saying Shema every night and every morning. So why did they start off? When do we say Shema in the evening? You say Shema in the evening when your parents told you to. What they're trying to figure out is not when are we supposed to, but or when do we do it? Because we know what we do. We do what our parents did, what our grandparents did, and what our great-grandparents did. We're trying to find sources. Do we have any questions thus far? Any comments?
You said that Moses received oral law from Mount Sinai.
Yes.
Could you explain that a little bit more? I'm not quite right. I mean, oral law is passed down.
Right.
So you're saying he got it, Moses got oral law directly from God?
Correct. So we're going to actually see that. Thank you for asking. That's a perfect segue. So if
And
we
where
look
did
on the
So who
paper
did
here.
he pass it on? So who
So
did
So let's read these first few paragraphs here, and then we'll see if that answers the question, Steve.
okay.
So an overview of the oral Torah is Masorah. What is Masorah? Masorah literally means passed down, referring to the oral law. The Torah states in Exodus 24:12 that God will give to Moses the stone tablets, the Torah, and the commandments. And the commandments alludes to the oral law. So in the year 2448 from creation, when the Jewish people got the 5 books of Moses and the tablets, they also received an oral Torah. This was the key map for the written Torah. So yes, God engraved the words of the 10 commandments in the stone. He dictated to Moses the words of the 5 books of Moses, and he explained to Moses the tradition and the ways of expanding and expounding on the written Torah. So for an in-depth discussion of the process of exegesis, I believe is the word, the process of deriving laws from the written Torah, we just recently finished a 6-week course called Book Smart, and in lesson 2 we learned all about Medrash and about expounding on the Torah. But 1 second, I made a bracha already before. Let's make a l'chaim.
L'chaim.
I am.
When Hashem gave the Torah to Moses, the 5 books of Moses, he also gave him a lot of explanations and things which were specifically not meant to be written down. And we're going to see a bit more about that soon. Steve, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. So some examples of how we know there must have been an oral tradition as well. So the first example that I have over here is that there was a convert who came to Hillel. There are more than one stories of converts who came to Hillel, but this is a funny story. Let me see where I can make my annotations. Here. Okay. So there was a man, and he came to Hillel. Hillel was one of the great sages, one of the leaders of the Jewish people. And he came and he said, I want to learn, I want to become a convert, I want to convert to Judaism, but I will only accept the written Torah. I will not accept the oral tradition. I don't believe that came from Moses. So he said, okay, perfect. Come to me tomorrow and we'll start learning. So he comes tomorrow and he starts teaching him. Here, we're going to see if I can switch to Hebrew. Let me see if I remember my letters of Hebrew here. We have this little box over here. Let's see if I can remember where the Hebrew keyboard is. Wait, why is this in? Here we go. Does anybody know what that letter is? Can we see it? Maybe let's make this a little bit bigger.
Aleph.
An aleph. This letter is an aleph. How do I make the font size bigger? I don't know. Okay. So this letter, he said, is aleph. Then, oops, where is base? Does anybody see what that letter is?
Is that
The letter is a base,
base?
and that letter is a gimel, and that letter is a dalet. So he came to them the first day and he taught him, before we teach you the actual Torah, I have to teach you the alphabet. So he starts teaching him the letters, Aleph, Beis, Gimel, and Dalet. I don't know why I can't make this bigger.
It's easy to see.
Okay, anyways, this is what he taught him the first day. Okay, very good. We learned 4 letters of the Aleph base. Aleph, Beis, Gimel, and Dalet. He came the next day for lesson 2. And the next day, Hillel wrote on the board, and he said like this. Today, we're going to learn, this is Aleph. This is Base. This is Gimel, and this is Dalet. So we're going to learn the first 4 letters of the Aleph base, Hillel said. This one is an Aleph. This one is a base. This one is a Gimel. And this one is a Dalet. Can anybody figure out what was the convert's question to Hillel?
Why do I have to learn the written law? Why do I have to learn both? And it's not enough to learn. I want to learn the written law, not just the oral law.
Very good. So he wanted to learn the written law. He doesn't want to learn the oral law. And thank you, Bela Esther. He said, I want to learn only the written law and not the oral law. So the first day, Hillel taught him Aleph, Beis, Gimel, and Dalet. And the second day, he came and he wrote on the whiteboard that he was teaching, and he said, this is Aleph, this is Beis, this is Gimel, and this is Dalet.
Why are they different?
Oh, very good. The convert came and the convert said, what are you talking about? Yesterday, you told me that this was an Aleph, a Beis, a Gimel, and a Dalet, and it was different. Today, you're teaching me different words mean different things. What are you doing over here? That's not right. Sorry?
Script and printing.
Say that one more time, Steve.
Script and printing. Cursive and print.
Oh, script letters and print letters. Okay, but he was actually teaching, basically, he put the letters out of order and taught him different letters mean different things. What was Hillel trying to teach this man? What do you think? Oh, here we go. Now I can make it bigger. I figured out how to make it bigger. There we go. And let's move this over here to the middle. What do you think Hillel was trying to teach this man by teaching him different things on different days, that the letters mean different things?
People interpret things differently?
Okay, people interpret things differently. It's close. I'm looking for something a little bit more. You're trying to learn only the written Torah. This was Hillel's explanation. You're trying to learn only the written Torah, but not the oral tradition, you won't know anything unless you listen to what I tell you. Without an oral tradition, then even the letters you don't know. In order to learn the Aleph base, you need a tradition of which one's the Aleph, which one's the base, which one's a Gimel, which one's a Dalet. You can't even read the words without an oral tradition. So how are you going to translate them without an oral tradition? And how are you going to explain them without an oral tradition? The written tradition by itself means nothing unless you have an oral tradition with it. Is that clear?
Mhm.
So that was Hillel's explanation of why we need the oral tradition, is because how do you know the translation of any words if you're not relying on what your teachers taught you? So we have to rely the same way how we're relying on which one's an Aleph and which one's a base, the same way how we're relying on the translation of the words, we have to also rely on the explanation of the words that we were taught by our teachers. So let's now clear all the drawings and close this up. Now we have some more examples of how we know that the written Torah, that the oral Torah was given together with the written Torah. We know that we are not allowed to work on Shabbat. We're not allowed to work on Shabbos. Here are the verses that describe the work that we're not allowed to do on Shabbos. Exodus 34:21 says, 6 days you shall work, but on the 7th day you shall cease from labor. You shall cease from labor even at plowing time and harvest time. So now we know you're not allowed to plow, you're not allowed to plow on Shabbos. You're not allowed to harvest on Shabbos. Exodus 35:3 says, you shall kindle no fire throughout your settlements on the Shabbos day. That's a third thing we're not allowed to do. And Numbers 15:32 says, once when the Israelites were in the wilderness, they came upon a man gathering wood on the Sabbath day, which is a fourth thing. And he ended up, it was one of the things that were not allowed to be done on Shabbos is gathering wood to make a fire. He was gathering it from a place where he wasn't allowed to, chopping down the wood. So far, we only have plowing, harvesting, fire, and gathering wood for fire are things that are not allowed to be done for Shabbos. Those are the things that are written clearly in the Torah. But we know that there are a lot of things that we're not allowed to do. We're not allowed to build on Shabbos. We're not allowed to destroy things on Shabbos. So how do we know all the other forbidden methods of work on Shabbos if not for the oral tradition? Let's move on to another one about the holiday of Sukkot, the holiday of Sukkot. Leviticus 23:42. What do we know about it? We know that you shall live in booths for 7 days. All citizens in Israel shall live in booths. So if you go to a Christian and you ask them, what does this verse mean? They will likely have no idea. What does it mean, a booth? How big does it need to be? Does it have to be covered? Does it have to have walls? Can it be just a gazebo? Where does it have to be? So we know that on Sukkot, we sit in a sukkah. It has to have walls. It has to have branch. The covering has to be a covering that's made from branches or from trees. How do we know all those things? It doesn't say in the Torah. The answer over here again is going to be because of the oral tradition that was given together with the Torah. On Sukkot, we shake. What do we shake on Sukkot?
Lulav and etrog.
A lulav and an etrog. What is that? Right? How do we see that in the Torah? The Torah says on the first day of the holiday, you shall take the product of a hadar tree, branches of palm trees, boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook, and you shall rejoice before the Lord your God for 7 days. What does it mean? The Pri Eitz Hadar, a beautiful fruit that comes from a hadar tree. What does it mean? The bough of a leafy tree. But if you look around, you see everybody has the same 4 things: an etrog, a lulav, a willow branch, and a myrtle branch. How do we know that? There are more examples here that you can look through on your own as well. I'll share a story. I was once waiting for a flight to New York, and while I was at the gate, I was standing next to sitting next to a Christian minister and his wife. We were going into discussion. We were discussing various things, and I asked him. It says in the Torah that you shall bind that you shall write these words. And these words shall be as a sign on your arm and as frontlets between your eyes. And he said, "Yeah, that's from the Shema." I said, "Perfect. It's from the Shema. What do those words mean to you?" So he said, "I think that it means that these words, the words of the Torah, should become so much part of you that it's like ingrained in your flesh, that it's so part of how you live that it's like a part of who you are." And then he turns to me and he says, "But you probably take that literally. Do you have a tattoo with those words on your arm?" So if we read just the Torah by itself, it sounds like these words should be written on your arm. However, we know that tattoos are forbidden in Judaism. What do those words actually mean? Bind them as a sign on your arms and they shall be as a symbol on your forehead. It's referring to tefillin. But how do we know what tefillin are? If you don't have the oral tradition, you would think that you're supposed to have a tattoo. But we know that Jews for thousands of years have been wearing tefillin. So these are some of the ways that we know that you have a tradition. Also, you have an interesting thing about punctuation, right? We all know the famous example that our teacher in 4th grade, when we were learning grammar, put up a sentence on the board: "Let's eat, grandma," or "Let's eat, grandma." Right? So we know that punctuation is key. The Torah is written without any symbols, without any punctuation. How do we know what the correct punctuation is? We read it the way our parents read it. You have the examples over here on the page as well. I want to move a little faster so that we can finish this by 11:15. Here comes the big question. If the oral tradition is so important, but before we get into that, is everything so far clear how we know that we have an oral tradition, or do we have any questions thus far?
Well, my question would be, if you ever played the game of telephone as a small child and whispered something clearly in the person's ear next to you, and that goes on and on and on, say 20 times, by the 20th person, it resembles nothing of what was first said. So how do we clearly hand down the oral tradition without wavering, without slight discrepancies that, generation after generation turn into huge discrepancies?
That is a very, very good question. A very good question. Does everybody understand what Lisa is asking? Everyone hear what Lisa is asking?
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody have something that they'd like to respond or answer to Lisa?
Rabbi, I would think because it's behavioral, not just verbal.
Oh, very
Tradition.
good. Very good. So if you, that's a great insight, Joe. Imagine you have, thank you for sharing that. Imagine you had a group of Jews who, let's say Shabbos, right? We don't turn on the light switches on Shabbos. Okay, this isn't not a good example for back in the day, but it's a good example for today, right? So imagine all of a sudden in would come one person and walk towards the light switch and about to turn it on. What do you think would happen in a room full of Jews?
They'd get up in arms.
Everyone would start screaming, "What are you doing? This isn't the way we do it." There's a funny story of a rabbi, and he took over he assumed the mantle of leadership when the old rabbi died. And it came the first holiday, it came time for Yizkor. And all the kids go out, right? Anyone who has parents that are alive go out. After this, I'm going to tell you another story about Yizkor, so please remind me. So after this, so all the kids go out, and then you have all the adults, or anyone who needs to say Yizkor stays in the shul. All of a sudden, a huge fight breaks out. Half of the people are screaming, everyone has to stand for Yizkor. And the other half of the people are saying, no, everyone has to sit for Yizkor. And they're going back and forth, back and forth. You have to stand for Yizkor, you have to sit for Yizkor, back and forth and back and forth. And this new rabbi is all confused. What am I supposed to do over here? Because in some communities, they stand for Yizkor. In some communities, they sit for Yizkor. What am I supposed to do over here? I don't know what's done over here. So he remembers there's an old man who was here for many, many years, but he didn't make it to shul because he couldn't walk. He lived, a few houses down. So the rabbi runs to this old man and he says, what do I do? How is it done in this community? How do we do for Yizkor? Do we stand or do we sit? Because everyone's fighting if they're supposed to stand or supposed to sit. He says, no. That's exactly the tradition in this community. Half the people stand, half the people sit. They sit and scream for 5 minutes whether you're supposed to standing or sitting. That's not a true story. It's a joke about tradition.
That's
But
great.
What about like the Sephardic? What about like the Sephardic who have different traditions than the Ashkenazi?
Ashkenazi.
Like I know that Sephardic. What did I say? I said Ashkenazi.
Yeah,
Hello.
yeah,
Yeah,
you did.
yeah,
You said
you're
it
good.
right.
Oh yeah. Like I know the Sephardic. They put the mezuzah facing up and down, and Ashkenazi puts it facing inward, and there are other things. So obviously, because they have lived in a different culture, Southern Europe versus Northern and Eastern Europe, they're obviously influenced by the culture around them, the greater culture around them. So how does that work into the traditions of the oral traditions?
This is a very good question. A very, very good question. I'm gonna get to that in just a moment. And if I don't get to it by a few minutes to 11:15, please remind me. Hopefully, it'll become clear through the rest of what we're going to be reading. So, this past year on Sukkot, on the last day of Sukkot, when we say Yizkor, there was a man who came to shul with his kids. His wife wasn't able to make it to shul. His kids are 3 and 4 years old. His father passed away a year and a half ago. He had to say Yizkor. He didn't feel comfortable leaving his kids outside because he had no one to watch them. And for whatever reason, he didn't feel like he had a close enough friend that he could ask to watch his kids. So we're getting ready to say Yizkor, and he's there with his kids. And the Chazan turns around and sees that there's kids in the room, and their mother is alive, their father is alive. He got very upset. How could you have kids here? You're not allowed to have kids in with Yizkor. So whatever back and forth was arranged and whatever happened, and hopefully the man didn't get too offended. But if you have someone who steps out of line to what we've been taught, Jews are not people to stay quiet, especially if you have the broken telephone. It started with one person. Over here, we started with 600,000 men between 20 and 60, all receiving the same message.
Mhm.
So yes, it's possible that one person will tell their child something else, but when you have that many people giving over the tradition, if you have 1 or 2 people who get it wrong, you'll have everyone else to keep them in check. Does that make sense?
But those 1 or 2 people amplify over time, and you may get a whole different sect of Judaism from that. and it broke from the oral tradition, the oral law.
So that is what started happening when the Mishnah was written down. And that's one of the reasons why they did start writing things down. And why today we have a mass, why today we have bookshelves and bookshelves and bookshelves and libraries filled with all the details and minutia of Jewish law to make sure that that doesn't happen. So when you had, let's say 1,000 years ago, right? So you have 500 students in the school, and one kid says, "Oh, my father did it differently." All of his classmates would say, "No, that's not the right way to do it," and they would bring him back and explain. And if they had a question, they would go to their teacher, who would clarify what needs to be done.
And who decides, as we go through different eras, what to do with new developments in medicine and electricity and computation? And, that wasn't around when 600,000 men stood at the bottom of the mountain. So it couldn't have been dealt with.
Right.
It's a very good question, Lisa. And that ties in also to what Steve was asking. You know what? Maybe we'll pause over here with and we'll finish next week with why it wasn't written down to begin with. And we'll answer those two questions and finish with that for today. So the answer to Lisa's question is the same answer to Steve's question, which is that when new things come up, or to the most part, answer Steve's question. When new things come up that were not discovered before or were not known about before, the job of the rabbis in their generation is to look, to seek, to understand, based on the principles that we know from generations prior, and to see what does it mean today. And I give an example. You have something today called surrogate motherhood, and even more complex than that is if you have someone who gives a donation of ovaries.
What?
A donation of their ovary. If a woman donates her ovary to another woman whose ovary isn't working, or she's having miscarriages, so you'll have, and it happens, and it's an incredible scientific breakthrough. So the question becomes, whose children are they, and are the children Jewish? So let's say you have a Jewish woman who gets a donation of a baby, of an egg, a fertilized egg, from someone else. So you have a surrogate mother, right? So the baby is already starting to grow, and then they take out the fetus and they move it into another mother. Who is the mother of this child? If one of them is Jewish and if one of the women is Jewish and one of them is not Jewish, we know that Judaism goes by the mother. So is this child going to be Jewish or not? What do you think?
That depends on whether or not you consider. That depends on whether or not you consider Jews a race or a culture. If it's a race, then it's the original mother who
It's a family.
gave the donation. If it's a family, then it's the woman who's giving birth. Is it genetics or a culture?
But if you take in a child that didn't come from the womb of a Jewish woman, the Orthodox would say they have to go through a year-long conversion process and get tested by rabbis before he or she can be considered a Jew. So is it just a timing issue or a genetic issue? Well, if you move
Right,
the
is it genetics or
genetic
culture?
fetus of a non-Jew into the fetus of a Jew, the genetics are still not Jewish. it's just a timing issue between a
And the rain-
non-Jewish fetus and a non-Jewish child.
Right, so you see
Right,
where this
that's
can
what
get
I'm
complicated.
saying. Is it
Mhm.
cultural? Is being Jewish cultural
Nature, nurture.
or genetic? If it's genetic, then the child is not Jewish. If being Jewish is cultural and a question of beliefs and so on, then the child is Jewish.
I have
I
a
would-
niece who grew up,
Is it race? Is it race or is it culture?
my
would think
sister, my sister-in-law was a non-Jew. Her family actually came over on the Mayflower. She married a Jewish man, my husband's brother, and she converted to do so. They had a child, and she's marrying an Orthodox Jew. Her shul says she has to go through a conversion process, even though she was bat mitzvahed.
But the child or the?
So that's
The
that is
child,
Well,
the
I mean,
child who
the mother
came,
was already converted.
the
when
mother
child-
was not Jewish, but converted.
So she's Jewish.
The girl's
Right.
Jew.
If she was
Yeah.
converted to Judaism and the child was born after she converted,
Right.
Doesn't
But
make
the
sense.
rabbis
I don't know.
the rabbis don't,
Yeah.
cannot consider that the conversion of the mother was appropriate, acceptable at their standards. So this child who grew up Jewish in a Jewish home has to go through a conversion before she can marry and be considered an Orthodox Jew.
That's their situation. But I would think if the woman, back to the other situation,
A rabbi, what about that?
one
I would
second.
think-
So let's hear from Joan, then from Steve. Go ahead.
I would think, thank you, Rabbi. I would think if either of the women is Jewish, then the child is Jewish.
You're talking about the embryo now.
Yes,
Yeah,
back to that.
she's back to
No,
that.
but what about what she just said? That
None of the
was
women,
converted,
1 second. Steve, go ahead.
and the child and the rabbis. Well, I mean, can you respond to what you just said? That the Orthodox rabbis didn't consider the child Jewish, even though the mother had already converted.
That's
right,
their-
because they're not aware of the kind
mean-
of conversion process the mother went through.
Yeah,
So
that's,
this is a good question, and it's gonna take us over time. So how about like this? I'm gonna write this down over here.
I'm sorry.
It's 11:15. It's the top of the hour. I want to respect
Was it-
everyone's
were
time.
these
in terms
rabbis-
of-
Were these rabbis in Israel or America?
So,
Boca
1 second,
Raton
before
Shul.
we continue, I want to start next week with this question. It's a very good question. So, and it ties in very well to the discussion. I don't think it's too far off topic. So I'm going to write down over here in my notes. This is where we got up to until why it wasn't written down to begin with. We were in middle of discussion about three things actually. One is difference between Ashkenazim and Sephardim.
Go.
Mhm.
become conservative or reform.
No.
Okay. Question. Topic number 2 that we're in the middle of is donated fetus or embryo. Is the baby Jewish? And question number 3 is why did Sarah Esther, why did Lisa's niece's rabbis tell her that she has to convert? Okay. Okay, so we'll start next week, God willing, with those 3 questions. Any other questions that we should write down? Okay. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being here. Thank you in no specific order, just in the order of the videos that are here. Thank you, Moshe Chaim, for coming. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Joan. Thank
And
you,
Susan.
Brett. Thank you, Rita. And thank you, Mitch. I hope you all enjoyed.
And Brett,
Sorry?
And Susan Weiner.
and Bela Esther.
Bela Esther. Yes, we said Bela Esther. Susan is there on the line with Joan. Okay.
Yeah, and thank you, Rabbi.
Shoshana. Sorry
Yeah,
for being-
thank you. Rabbi.
So,
Thank you, Rabbi.
I
you all
apologize
a
for
happy week, a
derailing
wonderful
the
week.
discussion.
Yes, I look very forward to continuing this discussion next week. Let me stop my share so I can see you all on the same page. There we go. Thank you all. What a wonderful way to start the day. Take care, everyone. Happy and healthy. And
Yes.
all the best.
Baruch
Amen.
Hashem.
Baruch Hashem.
Baruch
Baruch
Hashem.
Hashem.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.
Thank you.